You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
Good evening, world, and welcome to Gemerschein, Germany, on this Friday, the 16th of November at 9 o'clock. And a warm welcome to all listeners in chat room. A special greeting to listeners joining us for the first time. We are Critical Mass Radio, a non-profit station where hosts pay to broadcast their own shows. Our mission is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite as many like-minded people as possible, to join in and to come up with workable solutions as we all look at pressing issues. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us. Continue by making a donation on the web page, which is www.criticalmassradio.co.uk. Thank you. You are listening to the Changing Consciousness Show with me, the boxing vicar.
And me, Ruth, as a co-presenter. The Changing Consciousness show sets out to provoke thoughts and concepts, to try and find creative ways of living in a partnership with others on a global level. There are three major developments taking place globally, and they are A, collective change of consciousness, B, groups of people who are uniting together in order to create peace, and 3, global collaboration using the internet and social networking. CMR Radio, We Are Change Manchester, in conjunction with the We Are Change movements in every corner of the globe, are working together for peaceful solutions to create a better world.
Right, we're going to go to an advert for the conference which is taking place shortly in Manchester, and then we will listen to Playing for Change United, groups all around the world in a collaboration of music. Yes, I think the latest news about the Middle East reminds us very powerfully that peace is under attack. Wars for resources, control, rage, these things rage overseas. And then we've got such things as CCTV, radio frequency identity chips can be used to track our lives. Freedom of speech is threatened, our rights are threatened. And a lot of this is blamed that we need legislation to avoid terrorist attacks, while dismissing the democratic and civil liberty rights our ancestors fought to protect. I don't know about you, but for me, one of the biggest threats to democracy and individual freedom is not what the popular media suggest, and that is terrorism. Maybe it's institutional failure of governments to govern justly, with half-truths, need to control its special self-interest groups, for example, all these, which help to cause general apathy, hopelessness, and cynicism among the majority of voters. Hang on, folks. Fortunately, this pattern is being interrupted by an emerging citizen archetype, an aware individual who engages in both personal and social transformation simultaneously. Wow, what a change, eh? The Changing Consciousness show sets out to encourage people to be proactive. It calls for much more effort than going to protest meetings, signing petitions, and lobbying for peace, although those things are important too. These patterns of protest are deeply embedded within our present thinking, our culture, because we believe this is the only way. No, no, no. It is going to take more than just prayer, good intentions, signing petitions, and meditation to change the present institutional corruption. Hang on.
Well, don't hang on too hard. Don't give you muscle cramps. Yes, just a few thoughts that I had while listening to you. Don't you think there are many people out there who value their own peace, above all else? And when I say their own peace, it just means that they want to live their lives in peace. They want to be left alone. They don't want to be bothered. Or all they want is a certain degree of security. They don't want to get involved with the government, with political parties, with anything. In fact, I can clearly remember from my childhood and early youth when people from the generation who had been, witnesses of the Third Reich, and some of them certainly sympathizers, used to come up with things like, well, I know it wasn't all bad under Hitler, but at least our women were safe on the streets. But do you think that kind of attitude still prevails?
I'm sure it does. And I'm sure there are people in homes, both in Palestine and in Jerusalem, wanting peace and wanting to be in their room. The only trouble is a bomb or a rocket falls there, there's no peace. How can they go on? And how can I go on? Well, let's listen to Freddie Mercury now and think on those things. Well, I don't know about you, but I know how I can go on because there's a convergence of consciousness taking place all over the world. We are being made aware for the need to be proactive. That means to get outside our comfort zone because we have to work for change. It doesn't come. We have to work. We have to participate in serious, peaceful interventions in every aspect of corruption. Bank, political, religious, any ideologies that hinders our freedom, our movement, our choice of things and liberty of life.
Can I challenge you on that a little, Brian? No, I don't mean to be nasty, but these are wonderful words and there's a great concept. But at the moment, they're just words we are saying, and some of you out there may be wondering how, are we going to do that? We have to hold down two jobs. Maybe we're a couple. Each of us have to hold down two jobs to make a living, not to make any riches or put anything by, but just to get through with life and pay our bills. Where shall we find the time, the energy to make a peaceful intervention in banking or religious or ideology? This may all sound a little far-fetched for some people.
No, it's not far-fetched. You do it where you are, where you work. I've done it. You become unpopular, but that's where change takes place. It takes place wherever you are, in your home, in the workplace, wherever you meet people on the streets, there. How do you feel about that one?
Again, I can only wholeheartedly agree with you, but this may still seem a bit far-fetched. You say you've done it. Maybe you could give us an example, something that people can actually relate to.
Well, I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to anyone in the world. Yes, when I had this change, this motivation, I left a well-paid job. I was earning in the 60s, late 60s, £4,500 a year. That was really good money. I gave it up to earn £800 a year. And that's with a wife, my own 2 children and 2 foster children. Yeah. So in the end, you put your money where the mouth is. That takes guts. That takes all sorts of things. It's not easy. Okay.
Yeah, I can see that's not easy, and those are some big decisions to make that people maybe have to make today. But well, would you agree that in this day and age, maybe more difficult? I mean, in the 60s at least you had a choice. Today it seems quite often, or I can think of many people in situations where they feel they simply don't have a choice anymore. They are forced by circumstances to accept whatever they can get in terms of a job, in terms of a house. Maybe they just don't feel free to make these decisions. Oh, am I basing this on the wrong assumption?
No, you have an opinion to do. And we're talking about revolution. Last week we focused on the meaning of revolution, and you'll most certainly go through one of these things yourself as where we go through the program. But every act of change is a revolution. Whatever decisions we make, going on this program, speaking, people who are listening, so it's not something which is new. It's something which has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. It's not new, but on one side it said an opinion is a fine thing, but you have to be able to afford it. It will cost you.
Exactly.
Well, that may be true, yes. Even standing up to just anybody will cost you something. And that surely is a revolution at a very small level, but it may actually then widen out and have a wider impact on people. Well, thinking back to last week, as Brian just said, we looked at the meaning of revolution and why it happens and how we deal with it when it takes place. I'm not sure we found a very good way how to deal with it, except maybe for some of the peaceful revolutions we have seen. We last week looked at some aspects of European revolution, how they spread, and how they caused major social changes in England, in Europe, and around the world. But this week, we want to look at something else. Mostly problems have been solved by way of a compromise. But very often a compromise doesn't solve problems, but it perpetuates the problem, because if a problem isn't solved, then resentment will be there on the side of both parties, and this resentment will build over time and eventually maybe start war all over again, as we have seen. Look at the Treaty of Versailles, for instance, that was to end the First World War, signed on the 28th June 1919. It was built on a compromise, but very soon that became known as the unhappy compromise. A compromise which held the root cause of the Second World War and all the other conflicts since the 1950s, including the terrorism we face in the present. That compromise was determined by those who were then the 3 big players of the day: British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, and the American President Woodrow Wilson.
Okay, we're going to listen to some music now, and this is Tracy Chapman. Well, good evening, world. If you've just joined us, you're listening to the Changing Consciousness show on www.criticalmassradio.co. We're broadcasting live from Gemerschein, Germany, but the main station is based in Manchester, in the UK. Well, a lot of the stuff we're talking about seems to be the problem of Western civilization, which was founded on the ideas of two Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, who assumed that men were by nature rational and political animals. Now, all the problems we are facing now comes from that assumption of the Western world in logical thinking. If you hang on, later on you'll see where we come to how the global consciousness is changing. But for the time being, we're looking at the Western consciousness and the problems they have created. Because in 1651, an English philosopher whose name was Thomas Hobbes contradicted the world view which was given from Plato and Aristotle, and in his masterpiece, which was put forward in 1651, it was called Leviathan. Leviathan is a monster, a big sea monster. His work concerned the structure of society, making it legitimate for government who could be influenced by the idea of a social contract. That social contract still hangs around our necks. In his social contract theory, Hobbes suggested that the individual surrendered some of their freedom and submitted it to the authority of the rule or the majority. So what he did was to raise question between a natural and legal rights. So Hobbes' thinking was that humanity's natural state was violent, war of every man against every man, in which life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and in short, that man was driven by the fear of death amid this unrestrained competitive individualism. Then another English philosopher, John Locke, in 1690 supported this social contract tradition, but where he disagreed was that he wanted to form or establish a just society where men's natural rights were protected, which was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now later, this was echoed in Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of American Independence. So we have seen over the last 3 centuries of human history what we have tended to call victory. But victory turned out to be compromise, containing within it the seeds of fear, mistrust, and hostility, which has unresolved tensions. It hides it. It makes reconciliation at the best a temporary affair. So the seeds of revolution were sown in England with the Magna Carta, but that was about the barons who were rebelling against the king, not the peasants. And the French tapped into some of these ideas, and they had their revolution, followed by the American Revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, major conflicts and 2 world wars, and ongoing changes in social, educational, economics, and science. And those all things have brought us to the multiple complex facing us in the 21st century. In Europe, in the United States, and in now the up-and-coming industrial states like China and India, who are trying to imitate the West. What a pity. Do you have anything to say, Ruth, before we have some music?
Yes, all this all this really appears to be so multi-layered and complex. One thing following another, the American Revolution that seems to have started it all in modern times. But then, isn't it true that all these things we try to achieve in order to improve the lives of people? Democracy, enlightenment, equal rights, better education, economics, progress of science. It seems to have landed us in a bigger muddle than ever because things seem to become more and more difficult than they used to be.
No, I have to disagree with that. What it has done is helped people to be educated, to think for themselves. This is the problem we have to face now, is how do you change a system which was authoritative to a system which is, in a sense, self-releasing. Democracy has been the nearest we've come to it. What I'm suggesting is the change of consciousness taking place is now, for the 21st century, is opening up a door which hasn't been tried before, a global consciousness. We will come to that later on to the end of the show because we're looking at Western concepts, Western consciousness, and that has been logical. It hasn't contained within it wisdom. It's lost wisdom. It's logic. Let's have a break with some nice music. This is Laura's theme from Dr. Zhivago. And didn't he face a revolution and a change of consciousness in his own way? Okay, so first of all, we'll have a station jingle followed by Dr. Zhivago from the film, and it'll be Laura's theme, just to bring some peace and quiet to our mind.
You're listening to the Changing Consciousness Show on www.criticalmassradio.co.uk. The Changing Consciousness Show sets out to provoke thoughts and concepts to awaken creative ways of living in a partnership with others on a global level. It calls us to be proactive, to continue the work of progressive movements of the early 20th century with new concepts and ideals for an open democracy through activism. The Changing Consciousness Show tries to encourage ongoing generations to proactively seek freedom, individual rights, and so, in all peaceful ways, to create a modern democracy for the 21st century.
I'm sure you think that's all nice, neat and tidy and well packaged and all that. But when we have a change of consciousness, it actually means we see the world from a different way that we did previously. And when we see the world differently, we actually act differently. So the build-up, basically, of changing consciousness is to see how we have developed the consciousness looking from Europe, basically, because the two world wars have been European wars. And one of the most aggressive missionary armies, if you want, in the world, although they weren't armies, or they had armies, peace, have been Christianity. Not that it's had a bad, it's got a good message, but unfortunately it's put the message over in an incorrect manner, because the whole point of this particular religion came from the Middle East. It wasn't European, it was Eastern. And we have made it ours, thinking we are God's gift to the world. No. If we are God's gift to the world, we actually have to bring love, peace, and things like that. we're going to have the CMR conference jingle, which again, if you are living near Manchester, please attend and see what's going on. That's going to be followed by another group playing for change around the world. And one of the things we can see is that how music unites us. It unites us in this consciousness of sound, of joy, of hope. So the jingle first, followed by playing for change around the world. Well, hello world. This program may be coming live from Gemerschein in Germany, and the headquarters may be based in Manchester, but that's about all that it's connected to in its Western ideology, because the world is changing, and yes, for the last maybe 1,000 so years, Western ideologies of state and church have held power. And yet now it's brought us to the point of questioning the dogma of ideology. And that's, of course, come through education. So it's progress. It does also mean that education plays a very important part in liberation and in changing attitudes. It has to do with that, because nothing started to happen until the printing press was invented and people started to read for themselves that the things they had been told may not have been accurate. So what we're facing now is an accumulation and a complex situation of the build-up of maybe the last 1,000+ years. And maybe the end of the Mayan calendar, which is approaching in December this year, 2012, rather than prophesizing the end of the world, is actually suggesting, perhaps, that it brings in a new period of time, a beginning of a new era. Now, that for me is what's exciting, and that seems to be what's taking place. The old era is passing with its Western ideologies. It's passing away. Its religion and its politics and its institutions, which have dominated empires and so on. We have to be thankful for what we have learned, but we have also got to say, hang on, folks, we've done certain things which have not benefited everyone. So although they have been helpful in providing us with the benefits of industrial development, the missionary ideology that went with it has also brought us to the peak of destruction. And maybe part of the saving history has been the scientific, electronic, mass communication, advanced education, high speed of travel and ease of movement. Now, all these things collectively, which have perhaps taken a special speed over the last 100 years, has helped to bring a mix of culture and thinking of East and West. I am suggesting we are now at that point where we can create opportunity for people to work together in peace, bringing them hope, bringing everybody hope in the 21st century. I'm also suggesting, and if you don't take my word for it, go onto the internet. And if you have, that's if you've got the capabilities of doing it, and look at the way consciousness is converging into a holistic idea and ideals, which is a blending of East and West consciousness. Now that is what's taking place. It's making for a new attitude to scientific and spiritual exploration. And this, I am suggesting, is the paradigm shift which is taking place in the world. Anything to say, Ruth?
If I can come in with some light stuff, I don't know if you've told you this before, but you mentioned the internet and its 100,000 possibilities, which is certainly a very valuable asset in our world. And I mean, I'm pre-internet generation. I'm not a digital native, even though I got hooked onto it fairly quickly. But children now grow up and they have no idea that there was a world before the internet. So there's this son who asks his father, "Daddy, how did you get onto the internet before computers were invented?" Of course, his father had no answer for him because there is no answer to that. So that's on the lighter note. But that is another, it's a small change of consciousness. Children today grow up in a world which is very different from the one that we grew up in.
Okay, well, if there are any good rich bankers listening in, and I hope you are, here's some music for you. It's a fistful of dollars, and it's played by Eno Morricone. Right. Well, I hope you are not one of these ones that just want to get rich by robbing the poor. It's by working together in a creative, scientific, spiritual way that we may be able to develop a new creative convergence of global consciousness, of being free, yet being part of a whole. Now, these are concepts which, and yes, they're ideologies, and we always need an ideology. We need a reason to get up. We need a purpose where everyone can live in peace and prosperity, enjoying their own grapevines and fig trees, for there will be nothing to fear. Now, that imagery actually comes from the Old Testament. It's a prophecy from a prophet called Micah. And if you have a Bible nearby, hey, this is not a religious program. It's one which is actually challenging religion, looking at faith, looking at opportunities. Then have a look at Micah 4, chapter 4, verses 4. So what I'm not talking about is any God coming down to save the world. So if somebody wants to go and bomb and kill somebody else thinking they're going to get to paradise, well, if they've destroyed themselves in what they've done, they're in their own paradise. They're dead, blown out. I'm talking about a peaceful revolution of blending Western logic and Eastern wisdom, then using science and wisdom to give us a fresh character for living with mutual respect for life and for our environment in harmony with one another. In other words, let's take our shoes off. Let's feel the earth. Let our feet, our body touch the earth. It is the converging consciousness of Western and Eastern minds to create one. One, but many ways of living together where people have choice to choose their own ideals. Now, if you think that's going to be an easier and simple life, forget it. Living happy and fulfilled lives, working and listening to one another without that kind of missionary zeal of trying to say my way is better than yours and trying to persuade another either through persuasion or force to conform to the way which pleases us. That is compromise. That is what does not solve problems. It shelves them. It puts them on the back burner. It does not solve pressing issues, but holds the residue of misunderstanding, creating fear and hinders the process of solving a problem. So if you're listening anywhere in the world, you are not only part of the problem with me, but we are also part of how we solve the problem. Perpetuating a peace through strength approach, both in our communities and on the world scene, has continually demonstrated its limitations with a shallow victory. I have won. No, you haven't. Because in the victory of compromise, it contains the seeds of fear, of mistrust, and it renews hostility. Nothing? Hey, no. Ruth has got nothing to say. Well, then we have a break for a nice piece of music, and this comes from Moon River. If you think that living together is easy, then, or that there's a pie-in-the-sky ideology that practical science and wisdom could lead us into this field of consciousness to produce its yield for a more beautiful earth, bountiful harvest, then you may be mistaken, because to reach that point where everyone lives in peace and harmony, that shift of consciousness requires a lot of grit. It means we have to not only learn how to live in this shit, but get out of it. And we do that by doing it together. There is an easy position to take. Ruth did suggest that at the beginning of the show. If you wanted to live in peace, then why do we want to disturb anybody? If somebody wants to live in peace, that's their choice. And if they want to wait for a strong deliverer to come and save them, to bid for them on their behalf in a kind of promised kingdom, well, yeah, people have that right. And they can wait. But in the meantime, there are people who think they do not want to conform to constitutional ideals. They want to be in a place where there is free choice. Now, if we want a system where each of us is free, that means we have to be strong enough to do our own bidding. We have to negotiate on every level of life. But if we're too frail to do that task, we also have to be surrounded and turn to friends for a bit of help. Anything to say, Ruth?
Yes, the strong deliverer to come. It's an easy concept to adopt, and you say here that is what we have been told to do. Yes, that's what we have been told to do in with the Christian religion, and like it or not, even if you're not a follower of any other Christian religion, or indeed Islam or other religions, most of them have got this promise of the afterlife, of the strong deliverer who will set you free, etc., etc. So we've been taught this for 2,000 years. It's not something we can easily just brush off or say, oh, I don't believe in this anymore, because it has had a major influence on your life. And when you examine your patterns of thinking, you will catch yourself wanting that or falling into that trap ever so often. So it's a process of constant vigilance now, of being aware of what's going on inside you
what it really does mean then is what CMR are trying to promote with wearechange.org right around the world, that a universal consciousness which is required, it's been hinted at in the past as a maybe, it might be, it could be, but then it was put to what's called eschatology. It's a technical word, means you've pushed it into the future. It'll happen someday in the future when this strong deliverer will come. Now, I think if that happens, fine. But woe betide all of us, because I don't think any of us will be saved by a strong deliverer, because none of us are free of guilt or anything else like that. No. Without the force of religion and politics to build peace through conformity and control, it's going to require individual will. Now I'm going to ask Ruth to actually come over here and pronounce the next song we're going to play.
Right. Now that's an aria from an opera. I can't remember which one it is. Ach, ich fühl's by Diana Damrau. In English, oh, yes, I can feel it.
Well, hello. If you have just joined us, you are listening to the Changing Consciousness show, where we're looking at global change taking place. We've seen how Western ideologies have led us to the point where we are today in the world, over the last 1,000 years plus of building empires and really robbing other places, taking their wealth to use them for people who are seeking power, want to make money. And I'm suggesting that we've come to a time now where a state of shared consciousness of Western logic and Eastern wisdom coming together has within it the possibilities for peace, creating a peace-creating influence. But we all need to be awakened. We need to take individual responsibility to unite a community. Do you want to come in on this before I go on?
No, I think you might go on for a little while before I come in.
Okay. Coming from a Sanskrit word meaning coiled up, Kundalini has been described as a sleeping, dormant, potential energy in human beings. Now, this concept actually comes from the East. And it's a kind of series of, maybe a lot of you, and if there's people living in India or have done yoga, they will know what I'm talking about before I've even said anything. So this understanding is much more to do in the Western world than the East. This coiled up Kundalini is supposed to be at the base of the spine as a triangular bone that joins together the hip bones on each side and forms part of the pelvis. It's been described as a residual power of pure desire, and the image is that of a serpent coiled up like a snake. It also has seen and emphasized as the symbol of male creative energy, known in yoga as the lingam. It's this here that nourishes, heals, looks after, and gives an individual a higher and deeper personality. Now, I think this has been known, but it's been also abused, perhaps, because it's a knowledge which has been lost. But scientists are now coming to understand that this psycho-spiritual energy is part of conscious energy, which is thought to reside within the sleeping body. It can be aroused through spiritual discipline of deep prayer or meditation, but it could also be awakened spontaneously, bringing about a new state of consciousness, including mystical kind of illusions or illuminations. Anything?
Yes. Well, yoga, of course, is a very ancient science. Now, a very, very ancient discipline, and I think the word discipline has to be used there, because when you talk about awakening forces like Kundalini, it appears to be a massive power. So in the old days, you would be accepted as a student or a pupil by a yoga teacher, and then you would have to undergo years of training before any such awakening could take place. Whereas today, when you look at bookshelves and shelves and bookstores, you get things like be awakened in 3 days, 10 easy lessons to beginners, the Kundalini unfoiled, we can show you how to do it, that sort of thing. And I think there's a reason why these things were kept secret in the old days.
Why?
Because mystery is not something that you, or in awakening or enlightenment is not something where you open a package and put it in a blender for 3 minutes, drink it down, and then you have it. That's a sort of consumerism concept that all these books try to sell to you. Most people are very disappointed when they try it.
But that's exactly what we do in the West. We take that and we turn wisdom, thinking we can convert it to logic. So we have head knowledge, but we miss the experience.
Precisely, yes. You can't just turn it on like you turn on a tap. You have to give it time, patience, and discipline, and you can't be disappointed because you're not getting there as fast as you think you ought to. I can remember my father, who discovered yoga at a fairly early age in the mid-60s, and went through his routine fairly regularly, and I think was quite content with it until he started discovering those books, making all those big promises about Kundalini and the rest of it. And eventually he gave up his yoga exercises. I don't know, we never talked about it, but maybe because they weren't getting him where he wanted to be, or where he thought he wanted to be, as fast as he thought it should happen. So it is a kind of discipline, but you have to follow. Just when you learn to play an instrument like the violin, you can't do it on a weekend, and there are no crash courses. You just have to keep practicing, and you probably need a teacher who is not someone who delivers you from evil, but simply guides you gently, or sometimes maybe not so gently, along your path, because he or she has the experience.
Funny you should mention your father and 1970s, because the knowledge has been preserved in Indian yoga for a long time, thousands of years, but it has not fully been appreciated in the West before the 1970s. And it was then that more attention had been given to the notion of consciousness. But previous to that, in 1932, Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and others observed that Kundalini experience was seldom seen in the West. But we do know from ancient mystical literature, and this is where we have to be thankful for not only modern education, investigation, but also the electronic revolution, computers, digital things like that, because it shows us that the traditions of Kundalini has been known by various names universally over the last 3,000 years. For example, the Egyptians in Tibet and China, Native Americans, some Bushmen of Africa. It has also been interpreted from biblical references and the Quran. I think it was where Moses saw the flame. Jesus spoke about the serpent and things like that. It was also known in the works of Plato and other Greek philosophers, also in the Masons and their writings. Maybe that's why they're secret. Who knows? But since the awakening in the West, since the 70s, this thing has spread. There have been more people who've been trained in spiritual disciplines. And one of those offshoots of that is that there is a release of energy. And the more people who release this energy, there are others who recognize the symptoms and get the benefit. For me, my awakening took place in 1968. I wasn't after going and doing yoga classes and things like that, but I was interested in life, in what's happening. Then there was change taking place. There's a whole lot of change taking place. There was the new open society being developed and so on. And I went to Brighton Library and I started looking at books on meditation. I looked at Zen, and I sat in my room in a study for 3 months, looking at what is truth, who am I, what is life, those kind of questions that we all ask. And maybe you, if you're listening around the world, maybe you've asked those questions. If you are in chat room, maybe you have asked those questions. And I don't know what kind of answers you've come up with, but it scared the pants off me, because after 3 months, I got fed up of doing these different exercises, and I thought, hang on, if truth is truth, it has to do with more than my spiritual, my intellect, more than my physical. It has to be something there. Now, somebody in the chat room, Yvonne, has put on there that illusion can divide itself into many, but truth cannot. Well, I don't know what you mean by that, Yvonne, but when I was in Germany and in a discussion on this thing about truth, one of the people I was talking to gave me a symbol which was very good. And he said, when you hear a bell ring true, that there's no crack in the bell, it's a beautiful, clear sound. That's truth. And that's what it seems to me. The truth isn't something which exists out there, but when 2 or 3 or 4 people meet and they agree, just like the songs we've heard singing around the world, when everybody is in harmony, there is a ding, there is a beautiful truth. Nobody has to discuss it because we know it. And for me, that is what happens. But that experience that I had transformed and affected the rest of my life. And I'm looking at 60 years ago now. So the emerging conscious energy globally is like beginning to light a flame. And that flame is revolution. Basically, revolution is a turnabout. It's a change of heart. It's seeing something in a different way. Now, there have been times, and I wish I'd never had that, because it not only affected my life, it affected my family, affected the people I love. And I'm still on that journey, and I'm still, I wouldn't say chasing, but I'm still evolving in that experience. And if you think that experience is lovely and you want a nice little trip, forget it. Unless you have a good sense of humor, unless you're prepared to lose your life and all this kind of stuff you read in these books of wisdom. They are true. That's why we couch it. We couch it in symbolism and religion. And we go on our knees to pray, hoping that somebody will come and do our bidding. Where basically that spirit, that energy is within us. When we awaken it, yes, then it may be like the Leviathan.
Well, when it is awakened within us by something, because as you said yourself, you didn't make this experience happen. It just happened. It just happened to you. So all you can do is sort of be prepared, be there. It's just like the actor who's looking for an opening, and when the opening comes, or the chance and the opportunity comes along, and you have to take it and grab it. And you can, but only if you are there and fully prepared, which is the same as being aware of what's going on. So in some way or another, we always seem to come back to awareness. But I believe that we've been talking for a good long time, and maybe it's time for another little musical break. Have we got something there?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because too much talking and can bore the pants of us. Well, we're going to have about 7 minutes of music, but 2 songs. One is from Joni Mitchell. Sorry?
Mitchell.
Yes. And that's California. And the other one is a nice little sexy rumba. So just to realize that changing consciousness is not just a serious show, because without the joys of life, then life would be boring. Changing consciousness only means working for peace, living for harmony. But hang on, it says, have a glass of wine, have a good drink, have a good laugh. And here are 2 different musicians to give us entertainment.
CMR Critical Mass Radio is a completely non-profit station where the hosts pay to broadcast their shows. The mission of the station is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite like-minded people, and to try to come up with workable solutions. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us continue by making a donation on the webpage. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it is our turn.
Yes, it is our turn. And the thing is, it depends on what we mean by it's our turn. Is it our turn to basically just bitch? Is it our turn to point the finger at somebody else and say, look at them, just as it's happening in the news all around in the media. We can blame everyone and we can look at them and say what terrible people they are. But all the time we are doing that, we're not really looking at ourselves. And what I'm suggesting is that the new revolution is not destroying other people. It's actually destroying our self-image of the people we think we are. Sometimes we think, I'm okay, mate, and the other people are wrong, but it may be, hang on, mate, the other people may be okay, but I may not be.
Maybe it's not about being right or being wrong. Maybe it's just about being who you are, even if you are wrong, if you've made a mistake. If you're in the shit, can you still be all right? Can you still accept yourself for what you are? Or can you only accept yourself when you are out there rising and shining, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed? That again is an age-old question which has been phrased and rephrased by almost every religion and every creed, but it always comes back to the same old thing. If you are not at one with yourself, how can you expect the world to be at one with itself or be at peace?
Okay, we're starting to run out of time now. There's so much more we can look at, because when you look at revolution, we also have to maybe look at evolution. The two may somehow go hand in hand, and we're running out of time, so maybe we have to continue at a different stage in our life next week or the week after. It just remains for me to say that if we are really looking for individual freedom, it has to be worked for both individually and collectively, because it requires mutual respect. It requires integrity, honesty, truth, morality, goodness, quality of listening, debating, waiting for a solution rather than compromise. And so we could go on. But it's coming to the end of our time, and all it remains for me to say is that we hope you have a very good, restful and peaceful weekend. Do you want to say good night, Ruth?
Absolutely. Good night, everybody, and may you have a good and restful and peaceful night and a good day tomorrow.
And may the wind or the breeze be on your back. May the sun shine on your face, and may your God or whoever or whatever you believe in walk beside you and guide you into the future. We're going to leave you now, first of all, with not a mission statement, followed by some music, and we'll be looking at Rebel Without a Cause and Hey Jude with Pavarotti and his friends. So let's start with that.